From the Missouri Supreme Court, the state is upholding the death sentence for Marcellus Williams.
And despite a host of appeals, St. Louis County's prosecutor is expressing issues about the integrity of this case.
The state of Missouri will carry out the execution of death row inmate Marcellus Williams tomorrow night. Well, despite multiple efforts to prevent it, death row inmate Marcellus Williams has been executed. The closing day leading to Marcellus Williams.
Say his name! Marcellus Williams! His name! Marcellus Williams! His name! Marcellus Williams!
The name Marcellus Williams has echoed across headlines and protests. His fate sealed by a legal system that many believed failed to deliver true justice. His case, marred by controversy, brings into question the very foundations of evidence, testimony, and capital punishment. Williams was convicted of a brutal murder, the stabbing of Felicia Gayle, a crime so vicious that its personal nature points to deep-seated hatred. But as DNA evidence, witness testimony, and the justice system itself unraveled, the public outcry grew.
Governor Parson, shame on you!
This is the story of a man condemned to die, yet surrounded by unanswered questions that leaves doubts lingering in the air. Was he truly guilty, or did the system rush to execute a man based on flawed evidence? You are watching the General Documentary. It was August 1998 when Felicia Gayle was stabbed 43 times in her own home. The nature of the crime was so personal, raising suspicion that the killer had an intimate connection to the victim. The brutality was striking, more akin to an act of rage than a calculated murder. Marcellus Williams, a man with a criminal record, was soon arrested, tried, and convicted. But as the case unfolded, the details seemed as murky as they were damning. The conviction largely rested on circumstantial evidence. Stolen items belonging to the victim were found in Williams' possession, and testimony from a former cellmate who was later rewarded for his information alleged that Williams had confessed to the crime. Additionally, Williams' girlfriend at the time came forward, claiming that Williams had returned home with bloody clothes the day of the murder. These pieces of evidence painted a picture of guilt, but they were gaping holes that cast doubt on the entire case. Why the jury found enough to convict Williams? The evidence against him has since faced intense scrutiny. Despite DNA testing on the murder weapon, none of Williams' DNA was found. Instead, the DNA recovered from the knife belonged to an unknown male, raising the first major question about Williams' guilt. How could a man so intimately involved in such a violent crime leave no trace behind?
This man was murdered, because the word is murder. It's not an execution. You murdered him. The fact that this woman's own family, the victim's own family, was against his execution. The fact that there was a lack of evidence and this man was still murdered. The fact that there were people in front of the White House today still protesting, trying to save this man's life. He was murdered.
The prosecutor stating that there is a lack of DNA evidence connecting him to this crime that happened in 1998. That wasn't enough. The victim's own family, Felicia Gayle's own family, asking for this execution to be stopped. And that wasn't enough.
If they unalive him, we need to let people understand that there are consequences because he's innocent. They brought us here as slaves and they said, okay, kill him. There's 40 million of them. What are they going to do?
Public opinion was divided. Some claimed that physical evidence, especially the absence of Williams' DNA on the murder weapon, should have exonerated him. As one commenter put it, believe in physical evidence, not words. Others argue that the DNA evidence, while important, wasn't enough to overcome the confessions and the stolen items in his possession.
This guy was a career violent criminal. He was already serving, he was already convicted on a separate charge and got 50 years for robbery and something else. And then he had killed Felicia Gayle back in August of 1998.
But my head tells me that, do you not believe in the criminal justice system? A jury spoke, appellate judges spoke, attorneys generals spoke. This case was looked at over the past 2 decades, so many different ways, so many different times, by so many different people.
The laptop and her purse were found in his car by his girlfriend.
And to me, what is so compelling, and don't tell me after the fact that you have a story, what was this man doing with the victim's personal belongings? There was no explanation, no rhyme, nor reason.
Quit making martyrs out of monsters. And I do think, and there was a lot of discussion and debate over DNA evidence, but there was a lot of concrete, irrefutable evidence in this case. That is why all of his appeals lost. That is why, and there are cases when appeals are granted and decisions are stayed.
And there's also, I think, something else here. Maybe this is the bigger question about, should we have a death penalty? Because you can't undo it if you get it wrong, but as long as you have it, there is the precedential effect of, well, hey, maybe there's a shadow, maybe there's one grain of possibility that we're wrong here. Then what do you do with every other death row case? So I do think that the governor's point, my heart tells me it was wrong, my head tells me he's right.
Because this guy was guilty AF. He was guilty. He stabbed this woman 43 times and left a knife in her neck. He ambushed her. He bragged about it to everybody who would listen. All her stuff was found in his car and his property. He tried to pawn her laptop.
2 key testimonies played a significant role in securing Williams' conviction. The first came from a jailhouse informant who claimed that Williams confessed to the murder while they shared a cell. However, this testimony came with its own set of problems. The informant had been promised a reward for any information that led to a conviction, raising concerns about the validity of his account. One comment reflected this skepticism. The jailhouse informant was the only witness who learned about the reward and came forward for the reward. That fact does not make his information invalid. If it did, then no information given after a reward is offered would ever be considered in any investigation. The second testimony came from Williams' girlfriend at the time, who said she saw him with bloody clothes after the murder, yet her credibility was questioned due to her troubled past, as she had a history of drug addiction and criminal behavior. Her charges were dropped in exchange for her testimony, leading some to believe that her testimony may have been manipulated. The weight of DNA evidence cannot be overstated. DNA is often considered the gold standard in modern forensic, a near infallible marker of guilt or innocence. But in Williams' case, the DNA found on the knife and at the crime scene did not match him. In fact, the DNA on the murder weapon was from another unidentified male. How could Williams be guilty if his DNA wasn't present on the murder weapon? This led many to call for further investigation, suggesting that someone else might have been responsible for the crime. On August 22, 2017, former Missouri Governor Eric Griffin stepped in and issued a stay of execution just hours before Williams was set to be put to death.
The Missouri governor issued a last-minute stay of execution for death row prisoner Marcellus Williams, only hours before he was slated to be put to death Tuesday night. The stay of execution came after DNA found on the murder weapon did not match Williams, but instead matched another man.
But even with the execution on hold, the case had already sparked a larger conversation about the flaws in the justice system, the role of DNA convictions, and the use of death penalties in cases shrouded in doubt. Williams was spared from executions in 2015 and 2017, but this did not result in his conviction being overturned. The victim's own family was divided. Some believed Williams should face the ultimate punishment, while others opposed the death penalty altogether. Marcellus Williams was executed on September 24, 2024. Despite protests from prosecutors, advocates, and the family of the victim, his appeals were denied and the execution proceeded. There were widespread calls, including from the Innocence Project, to halt his execution, but clemency was ultimately rejected by military officials, and the US Supreme Court also declined a stay. As doubt about the case mounted, the public grew louder. Many questioned why the state would proceed with an execution where such significant doubts remained. Critics argued that the failure to definitively match Williams' DNA to the crime should have altered his execution. One comment captured this sentiment perfectly. This is a transvesty of injustice, as it sounds like there was some doubt here, so they should have altered it. Marcellus Williams behind bars while the legal battle and public discourse raged on. Williams maintained his faith. He spent years on death row, waiting for justice.
I don't believe in the system, the criminal justice system. I don't believe in it, you know what I'm saying, to that degree. But I know that it can be used for good as well. So if good come out of it for me and for my family and for all those that's been supporting me, then all praise be to Allah.
In his letters and interviews, he spoke of his belief in Allah and his hope that truth would prevail. His time in prison, though spent under the shadow of death, was marked by a quiet perseverance, a belief that the system could still deliver justice despite its flaws.
There's a little supplication that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he used to say, "Oh Allah, if life is good for me, then give me life. If death is good for me, then give me death." You know what I'm saying? So that's how I feel. You know what I'm saying? I say the same supplication. So yeah, I'm at peace, of course.
My brother in Islam was found guilty. It was a reasonable conviction, and upholding it was reasonable, one comment said. Reflecting the complex emotions surrounding the case, Williams' journey became emblematic of the struggle between faith in the system and the failures of human justice.
Governor Parsons is ignoring a ruling by the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, from 9 years ago. He's ignoring a ruling by his predecessor from 7 years ago. He's ignoring prosecutors. He's ignoring DNA evidence. And on top of it all, the victim's family didn't want him executed.
Marcellus Williams' case is not just about one man. It is about the very nature of justice. He was convicted, but the evidence never fully added up. The DNA didn't match, and the testimonies were questionable. The government, the courts, and the public all played roles in shaping his fate. Yet, the question remains, was the evidence truly strong enough to warrant a death sentence? As one comment summarized, even if he was guilty, the execution felt rushed and flawed. There was too much doubt. The doubt that permeated his case continued to haunt those who followed it, reminding us that the line between guilt and innocence is not always clear, and that when it comes to capital punishment, doubt can be a matter of life and death. Marcellus Williams' stories is a stark reminder of the complexities within the justice system. The use of circumstantial evidence, flawed testimonies, and the limitations of forensic science all conspired to create a narrative that led to his conviction. While some believe in the certainty of his guilt, others question the rush to judgment, especially in the absence of irrefutable DNA evidence.
I like Randy. But all those people he mentioned, the Attorney General, the Governor, and so forth, those are all elected people. They're politicians. Every politician is for the death penalty because law and order and crime and punishment are so profoundly center in our collective consciousness.
But the Supreme Court
we
of the
all
United
are so
States,
afraid of crime and violence and so on.
He's making the point, Geraldo,
that
he's saying the courts didn't step in either. He appealed through the state courts and the United States Supreme Court. And look, and it is tough to explain, right? The items found in his possession. The defense's explanation is, well, the woman who claimed that she found them there may have actually been a suspect here, and she only came forward after they offered this reward, except she never actually tried to get the reward after they put it out there.
As we reflect on his case, it forces us to consider larger questions about the roles of death penalties and whether our justice system, however sophisticated, is always just.
Reviewing the aggravating factors that we unanimously found to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt in Section A above, we, the jury, also unanimously find that the aggravating factors are sufficient to warrant a possible sentence of death, and they have marked yes.